9/11, 5 years later, remembering the ones we lost, honoring those that helped. It's a look back at the day that changed our nation forever and where we go from here. Don't miss our special live coverage, 9/11, the day America changed.
Morning of September the 11th, our nation awoke to a nightmare attack.
Monday, President Bush discusses the day America changed and the future of our nation. It's a special presidential address live from the Oval Office on Fox News Channel.
Along with the tragic events like 9/11, there comes sorrow, pain, and anger, and eventually those conspiracy theories. Well, believe it or not, there are groups out there that believe the U.S. government somehow participated in the terror attacks. One man who questions the events of 9/11 is activist John Albanese. He produced an independent film called Everybody's Gotta Learn Sometime. Also joining us is Larry Klein. He's the executive producer of a Nova documentary called Building on Ground Zero. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Mr. Albanese, what do you think was covered up?
Well, there's a whole panacea of information that has been widely researched since the events of 9/11 that the media doesn't seem interested in covering. There's been over 20 whistleblowers who have come forward since 9/11, some of them high-ranking members of the administration.
But is the contention that the government, the U.S. government, was somehow involved in 9/11?
Well, that's some of the contentions that are out there. I basically focus on studying the cultural phenomenon of this movement and why it exists. And
this week we saw a video of Osama bin Laden with the 9/11 hijackers. Now, the guy already has taken credit, if you can call it that, for what happened on 9/11. Osama bin Laden bragged about it a couple of years ago, but now we actually see him physically with some of the 9/11 hijackers. Doesn't that put these myths to bed?
No, I don't believe that it does.
Why not?
Well, because I think that there's credible research out there that calls into question many aspects of the attacks of 9/11 that have not been addressed by the 9/11 Commission. The 9/11 Commission, Thomas Kean just the other day on August 2nd in the Washington Post said that he considered criminal charges against NORAD.
Let me bring Mr. Klein in. Mr. Klein, what's your initial reaction to these conspiracy theories?
Well, you know, I just have focused through the Nova program that we made that's on this week on the structure of the buildings themselves. A lot of the conspiracy theories talk about bombs, charges being set in the buildings, that the planes themselves were not alone responsible for bringing the building down. And I not only followed the study by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which was released this year, but in 2002, Nova and the BBC did a program called Why the Towers Fell, in which I followed the first investigative team from the American Society of Civil Engineers. All independent people, mostly volunteers, and neither study found any evidence that even remotely supported a theory that said that there was something else beside the impact and fires that brought those buildings down.
So, Mr. Albanese, I mean, here you have the engineers, some of the engineers responsible for the building of the World Trade Center years ago. You have current engineers, everybody that seems to know their stuff about the World Trade Center better than anybody else says the most logical, what we saw is what happened. The planes brought these buildings down.
Well, first of all, let me just say very quickly that my movie does not deal with the collapse of the towers.
But a lot of these conspiracy theories say that.
But I'm not a structural engineer and I'm not a physicist, but I can say that I am familiar with Larry Klein's work, and I know that the main bone of contention is that Mr. Klein's work does not seem to address some of the laws of physics that other physicists from accredited universities are raising, such as the law of conservation of momentum. Why the buildings fell so fast. It seems like there was no resistance.
Mr. Klein, what do you say to that? Why did they fall so fast?
Well, they didn't fall that fast. In fact, what was it, almost an hour and a half in the case of the first tower?
No, the tower fell in 10 seconds,
Tower 1,
Larry.
56 minutes in case of the second tower. They actually stood quite a long time. The mechanism of the collapse involved the final failure of the exterior columns of the building. When they gave way, they snapped. And when they snapped, the top of the building came down. You can see it as clearly as anything in all of the images.
Mr. Klein,
they came down in one piece.
He just
that's what happens. The
Mr.
weight of
Albanese,
those buildings brought them straight down.
So, Mr. Albanese,
that's physics.
The point that Larry Klein is making is that it took an hour for the structure to become so weakened that once it started to pancake, nothing could have held them up.
I'm talking about the rate of collapse from the moment where that top started to collapse. It went from top to bottom in 10 seconds
Gentlemen,
flat.
we have to leave it at that. But John Albanese, you got the structural engineers right there, the guys who were involved in building the World Trade Center.
Well,
I can't believe how anybody could still believe that what we saw happen isn't what happened.
Well, perhaps you should have structural engineers on. Perhaps you should have structural engineers on the show to discuss it.
We have Mr. Klein on, and he interviewed those, and the Nova special is tomorrow. Correct, Mr. Klein?
Correct.
Okay.